Okay, welcome everyone. Today we're going to start emotional intelligence. Session 1 will go over some of the background, the theory of emotional intelligence. 2 weeks from today, when you come back from spring break, we'll do some exercises to help us practice these emotional intelligence techniques. I find emotional intelligence very important to communication. I don't think there's really anything that dictates how effectively you communicate with someone else than how well you're managing your own emotions and how well you're understanding their emotions. So let's get a couple definitions of emotional intelligence, just so we understand how we put all this into context. Let's start off with this one. Emotional intelligence is the ability to use, understand, and manage emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. Sounds like good stuff, right? If you're able to do all that stuff. So identify, use, understand your emotions. Understand when you're angry and how that's going to affect your ability to communicate. If you're really frustrated and stressed out, this may not be the best time to have a check-in with your boss about some things that you would rather, see different, things you want to see different. If you're frustrated about something that happened with the copier machine, you may not want to take that out on a client. So understand how that's going to affect you and manage that in a positive way to do all that good stuff. Another definition for us to think about. If you have high emotional intelligence, you're able to recognize your emotional state, the emotional state of others, and engage with people in a way that draws them to you. We want to do that as well, right? Did you all take a look at that video, the Daniel Goleman video, a little bit? Were you impressed with what you saw in terms of how emotional intelligence might help you in your business lives? A little bit, anybody sort of on the fence maybe?
What video are you talking about?
There was a video linked to Daniel Goleman, the founder of emotional intelligence from the business standpoint, explaining why it's important to use emotional intelligence in a business setting. He went over such things as this. It will help you. That video was on the syllabus, right? Yeah. Video link? Okay. All right, you can check it out later. All right. As I mentioned, Daniel Goleman in 1995 popularized emotional intelligence for the business world. It was developed a few years earlier by someone else. But what the business world liked about the way Daniel Goleman framed all this is he put it into how we can be effective business people context. He said, look, everything comes down to effective job performance in terms of how we use this technique, how we use this stuff. Granted, there are other uses for it, but let's just look at it in the context of effective job performance. And he did some studies, and he says, what contributes to effective job performance? Is it IQ, how smart you are? No, being smart is helpful, but we've all had examples of managers who are really smart, coworkers who are really, really smart, but just not good at their jobs for one reason or another. Next question. Does it come down to job skills? Maybe you're not the smartest, sharpest knife in the drawer, but you really know your job? Okay, this could be more important, and Goleman found that it tended to be a little bit more important. But still, it was not as important as emotional intelligence. Your ability to relate to the people around you, especially if you're a manager, your ability to inspire subordinates. He did a couple of different studies, and I don't completely understand or want to get into too much of an explanation of how he cut the data, but he said that emotional intelligence accounts for between 62 and 85% of effective job performance. Your ability to manage your emotions and communicate effectively with people because of your understanding of those emotions affects your job performance, the way you relate to clients, the way you relate to associates, managers, the way you communicate the needed business information that you need to communicate. There are a number of ways to break up emotional intelligence, to categorize the different parts of it. I like looking at it in terms of 3 parts. They are self-awareness, understanding what's going on with you, how that's going to affect your ability to communicate. Emotional management. All right, if you're really angry, you're really frustrated, you just hate talking to someone, how can you manage that in a way that's not going to hurt your job performance? And then thirdly, can you take that self-awareness understanding, your ability to manage your emotions, and interact effectively with other people? So those are the 3 categories, the 3 buckets I like to put emotional intelligence in. And I think that'll frame our discussion as we look at some abstract examples. I think emotional intelligence is relevant to communication. I really think nothing is more important than understanding your own emotions in terms of how you communicate. If you're nervous, if you're frustrated, if you're mad, that's going to affect the way you communicate. That's the first step. The second step is understanding what your audience might be going through. Are they afraid they're going to lose their job? So when you come into their office and ask them about increasing their job performance, are they going to freak out? How can you manage that? How can you work with them in order to refine your message, the word choice you use? Anything we've learned in this class, the eye contact, the body language, it's all just a tool to effectively connect with your audience. And your emotions, I think, plays into that more than anything. So, there's a couple of things. Let's go ahead and go to this quick little exercise I like to do to think about the job skills, characteristics of good managers you've had or bad managers you've had, and we'll think about how this fits into our emotional intelligence discussion. So what I'd like you to do is to go through this thought process with me. Think of the best manager you've ever had, and also think of the worst manager you've ever had. And then I'd like you to write down the top 3 attributes the best manager you ever had. And I would also like you to write down the top 3 attributes that the worst manager you ever had. All right, so you're going to start thinking about that. There's a there's a workbook. You can put those, yes, you can write those in. And I've got some little stickies I'm going to come around with, and I'm going to have you put each of those 6 words on a little sticky. And we're going to do an exercise to see where this all matches up with our emotional intelligence discussion. But while I prepare for that, you go ahead and write the top 3 attributes of your best manager, top 3 attributes of your worst manager.
I've had 2 learn out of this.
You could do a number of things. You could pick one. You could write 6 attributes for worst managers, and I could give you extra stickies. That's definitely something you could do. Well, let's do this. I'm going to pass around these stickies. Take 6 of them and pass them on to the next person. Should be about 6. Should be about 66 now.
You can write the words on the stickers. Maybe
But. So you're going to have 6 stickies, and you're going to write all 6 of these words. We're going to do a little exercise that's going to put this in context for us.
Oh, I have to do mine.
You didn't write that yet? Huh.
behind the screen.
What's that? Oh, an eraser. Oh, that's nice. Nice, Jerry. Okay, we have one more seat. All right, next one. So, when you have those 6 attributes, you're going to think about where do those attributes fall? How can we categorize those attributes? Do those attributes have to do with this manager's intelligence, IQ? Do those attributes have to do with this manager's job skills? Or did those attributes have to do with this manager's emotional intelligence? So if you would, take the 3 attributes, the 3 stickies from the best manager, put them into whichever category they fit in, and then take your 3 stickies from the worst manager, please put them into whichever category they fit in here.
We go and like put it there. Right.
Take your time. All right, so what do we see here? What does the data just in this small sample show us? Jared?
EQ seems like the most important, the best and worst manager.
Yeah, EQ is the most important. All right, the thing that really makes you dislike someone is not necessarily because they're stupid, not necessarily because they can't do their job, but because they are rude, hypocritical, impulsive, condescending, irritable, arrogant, insensitive. Similarly, the thing that makes you feel really inspired by someone It's the way they relate to you because they're in control of their emotional intelligence. And they're calm, supportive, trusting, they care, team-oriented, they have leadership, caring, trust, proactive, considerate, sympathetic. Right? Emotional intelligence provokes that kind of response from people who are subordinate to you. Similar to Goldman's results, I'd say about somewhere between 60 to 80% of job performance. In this instance, job performance is cultivating a good team or making your employees like or dislike you. Seems to be related to emotional intelligence. So, let's think of these three different categories. Remember, I like to categorize emotional intelligence in terms of self-awareness, emotional management, and social management. So let's think, what do we have if we have each of those? And we're going to start with self-awareness. If you have self-awareness, what good things does that bring to your job performance? 1, understanding of emotional effects. If you're angry, how's that going to affect your ability to communicate? If you walk into a situation, a room that makes you nervous, what things do you need to be aware of so you don't do something impulsive or something that's counterproductive to your career? Congruent verbal and nonverbal. What does that mean? What do I mean by that?
Means you saying in your body language is portraying the same thing. You're not saying I'm not angry, but acting angry.
Yeah, how about that?
Slap
You want to
the
be a
door.
person who says, I'm not angry, but act angry? Is that going to make someone like you? Make someone want to work for you and put you under the best manager? No, you want to be congruent with your verbal and nonverbal. You want to be, for lack of a better term, at peace with yourself and clear about what you're trying to communicate. Let me put these next three up as a unit. If you have self-awareness, you have awareness of needs, strengths, and weaknesses. You also have awareness of your values and goals. With that awareness comes a sense of acceptance and confidence. So let's break those down. Aware of your strengths and weaknesses. Aware of how you fit in with a team. How you can contribute. What you might need help with. Needs. Now, if you're not aware that you have needs, does that mean you don't have needs? Do your needs go away if you're not aware of them? Yeah, I'm being facetious. You still have needs. If you just don't acknowledge them, then that can lead to some incongruent messages for those around you. That can lead to some passive-aggressive behavior. That can lead to some things that are detrimental to your ability to interact with others. Similarly with values and goals. You know what's important to you, you know what your values are. Have you ever worked with someone who just really doesn't? They might find themselves in a situation that they're uncomfortable with. They don't know why, they don't know how to explain it. Any of you found yourself in a situation like that?
Well, one of the things I wrote for the worst was inconsistent. I think that could be lack of awareness of values.
Okay, lack of awareness of what's important to them. Yeah. So this analysis will put you at more peace with yourself, for lack of a better term. Also help you explain to those around you how you can make a contribution to the team. If you have a weakness that you don't fully understand, and you're always trying to pretend it's not a weakness, that's going to cause some problems. But in understanding of this, will bring this sense of self-awareness, self-acceptance, and confidence. All right, so those are some things I think you have if you have self-awareness. Let's move on to the next category, emotional management. If you're able to develop this skill of emotional management, you'll have a number of good things as well. The first and foremost being rational thought. We want to have rational thought, right? We don't want to be so frustrated, so stressed, that we lose control of our ability to think rationally. And that's what often happens. When you get nervous, you get angry, and then an hour later, a day later, you think, man, I really shouldn't have called my boss, yada, yada, yada. I really shouldn't have told so-and-so that they were going to be fired. Now they're all nervous. I just was mad. I didn't think this through rationally. So I'm going to manage that emotion and think of the best way to communicate. In addition to emotional management, let me bring up a few of these. Resiliency, patience, flexibility. All right, let's start with these three. So, if every time you encounter some sort of emotional roadblock, if every time you get frustrated, you lose your ability to bounce back, you lose your ability to be patient, and you say, no, I can't be flexible, it has to be this way. I got upset this morning, and so now my whole day is ruined. You need to be able to work through that in a way that you can bounce back with some resiliency, that you can be patient because it didn't work out this time, maybe it's going to work out next time, and you can be flexible. It doesn't have to be the way you planned it. You need to manage these little road bumps that come up and work through the emotions with that. The ability to do that, I think, gives you a sense of confidence. I don't know what I'm going to encounter when I walk into this board meeting, but I know I'm going to be able to manage my emotions. If somebody throws something at me that frustrates me or confuses me, I'm going to be able to be resilient, patient, I'm going to be flexible. My manager said one thing one day and then something else another day. I'm going to manage my EQ part of this. Motivation. I also like to put motivation in with emotional management. And my thinking on this is that we are all motivated. We all have goals, desires, things we want to accomplish. The question is, how well can we handle the little setbacks that come up in achieving our goal? What prevents us from achieving our goal so much of the time are these frustrating things that lead to frustrating emotions. And I think being able to unpack a lot of that will just remind you how important your goals are to you. Important what you're trying to do, how important it is that you accomplish this or that. And the thing prevents us so much of the time is this frustration that we can't control. Lastly, physical and mental health. We're stressed out all the time. It's going to affect our health. We want to manage that effectively. We don't want to be stressed out all the time. We want to be aware of what we're frustrated by and think about how we can manage that emotion and put it into a healthy conversation. Get to the gym, work out, realize this is just not the time for me to be making that phone call. This is just not the time for me to be replying to that email. I need to go to the gym and get some stress off my head. So, this is the emotional management category. Liv.
With the word control put in anywhere over there?
You mean like we would have control?
Yeah.
Sure, I could go with that. So, rational thought, ability to control when our emotions want to take us away from that rational thought. Yeah, it's not necessarily repressing your feelings. It's not saying that you're not going to be true to what you're feeling and express what you need to express honestly. It's thinking about what's the best way for you to do that in the way that's going to work best for you. Social management. What do we have? We have the ability to manage our social lives, manage our social interactions. Number one, empathy. What does empathy mean? Vanessa.
The ability to put yourself in someone else's place, that's the attempt so that you can understand what they're coming from.
Yes. Understand what they're going through. The ability to feel their pain. Think, gosh, they must be worried about losing their job right now. And their kid is in rehab, so they must be stressed out about that too. So that's probably the reason they're acting this way. I need to understand that and relate to that effectively. We all have empathy. We can all empathize. Empathy is an important part of human social experience. We can look across the room and we can see somebody get a little paper cut on their finger and we just kind of like, dude, that must have hurt. Like I feel that pain. We feel that and we understand that in a way that other species don't. And that's been an important part of our social development. We're social human beings. We can feel that empathy, we just need to tap into it. Insight. So I empathize with you. I understand you're going through pain. What does that mean for the analytical way I'm going to approach you? What insight can I glean from that? Should I ask you a very gentle question? Should I make a very clear statement? Should I send you an email? Should I make a phone call? What insight can I glean from my empathetic understanding? And lastly, how can I relate to you? So first, I may have confused these a little bit. So first, can you empathize? Second, what do you understand from that empathy? And thirdly, how am I going to relate to you? How am I going to think about interacting with you because I empathize and because I have insight about what you're going through? So those are the three buckets, the three categories. Any questions so far? Let's think about putting those in context with some examples. Some examples that may resonate with things you've experienced in your lives. I've got a number of questions, descriptions of things people do, things you might have done. As we go through each of them, I want you to think about, does the person who does this, are they a high emotional intelligence person, a high EQ person, or are they a low emotional intelligence person? And I also want you to think about which of the three categories would this attribute or skill fit into. So let's take a look. First one. Imagine this person. This person says to you, I change my tone and behavior depending on who I am interacting with. So first question, is this a high EQ person or a low EQ person? And what category do you put it in? High EQ. Excellent. In what category?
Social management.
Social management? Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I change my beliefs and values depending on who I'm interacting with. But one person. I mean, there's a ton of these. We get at least one for everybody. If we get tired of it, we can just skip it. One person. Is high EQ or low EQ? What category does it fit in? Yeah.
I feel the low EQ.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
Something with the confidence or self-awareness.
Okay. Yeah. So I could go with a little self-awareness. Might go a little social management as well. All right. So I would say this is a low EQ person, self-awareness and social management. You don't want to change your values and beliefs, but you do want to change your tone and behavior. If necessary, I can be courteous to a person I dislike. So how do we describe that person? Is that someone who's just not really in touch? Is always being fake? Janae.
I think that's high EQ in terms of self-management.
Okay, I'd agree with that. I was being facetious. I don't think that's someone who is being fake. I think that is someone who is managing their emotions effectively and interacting in a way socially that's going to be positive. Second.
Yeah, I just felt, I don't know whether I'm correct, but that could be more or less emotional management.
Sure, if necessary, it can be. So you're really frustrated, and I'm not going to let this frustration get the better of me and ruin my career.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to this person, I'm going to get the information I need, and then I'm going to go back to my office and never talk to them again, hopefully. I avoid difficult conversations, even if having those conversations is necessary and important. Great?
That's low EQ.
Yeah, which category?
Trying to be self-aware, but I
Yeah,
think it's
everything is a little self-awareness, but it's also,
It's not social management though, right? Because
it could be. I think there's no right answer to this one. I might say a little more emotional management, because these feelings might come up when you have to have a difficult conversation. You may not like having a difficult conversation. If you tell someone they're getting written up, tell someone they're getting fired, tell someone you don't want to date them anymore. These are things that stress all of us out. Are you going to be able to manage that emotion and interact effectively? So I think it's big part of emotional management, also a little part social management, and of course self-awareness affects everyone. When I become occupied with a negative thought, I cannot concentrate on anything else until it is resolved. Josh?
OEQ, and I guess part of emotional management.
Yeah, I would say that. We have these negative things come up. Can we function and do our jobs in the meantime? Are we able to compartmentalize? Do our best to deal with it? Sure, there's going to be a little stress in the meantime, but I still need to move forward. When things get bad, I like to look at the bright side. Jerry?
I think it's high with emotional management.
Yes. Yes. That's what I would say. High and emotional management. I think this is really important. I used to be the person who did not like this person. Someone who always had something positive to say. Oh, well, 3 tires are flat. At least there aren't 4 tires flat. Strangle that person. But it happened. All 3 tires are flat. All right, how can we look at this, maybe not necessarily with a positive spin, but how can we be resilient and patient and flexible, and maybe things will work out a little bit better. I used to hate people who used to say things work out for the best, or things happen for a reason. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That used to drive me crazy. Things happen for a reason. Hey, yeah, there's a flat tire, happened for a reason, because there's a piece of glass on the street. That's why it happened. No, there's some higher purpose. Well, there's not necessarily a higher purpose unless you look at the best situation possible, unless you take action to be resilient, be flexible, be patient, and make the best you can of the situation. Think about this one all the time. I mentioned to you my career background. I had a number of different careers before ending up doing what I'm doing now, acting, finance, and now doing more coaching and teaching. I think my ability to be flexible and look at the bright side of each of those first 2 careers that didn't work out exactly as I planned helped me get to where I wanted to be. And I could still be crying about how I'm not a movie star. And that really wouldn't do me any good. I'm good at expressing my emotions and telling people how I feel. High EQ, low EQ? Helen?
I think it's high EQ because it says the good at.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, I'm good at yelling at people. What if I were to say that?
No.
That'd be low EQ. But I would agree, this is a high EQ person. If you don't understand why you're frustrated, if you're not able to verbalize in a socially acceptable way, well, I didn't really like it when you left me alone for 3 hours at the party. No, because I felt like I have these needs and these values. I mean, if I'm able to explain that to you carefully, then that's going to be positive for our relationship. If I'm not, I'm just going to be mad all the time. That's probably going to be negative for our relationship.
I would actually say that this is a situational. I mean, sometimes verbalizing everything is probably not the best choice.
Yeah, why don't you take this next one for you? If I'm angry at someone, I need to immediately tell them how I feel.
That's really low, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
You can do that with your family members, not at work.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you shouldn't even do that with your family members
Well,
all
it
the time.
depends.
Yeah.
Again, it depends.
Okay, so to Priya's point that she brought up, there's 2 sides of every coin. Just because you're angry, just because you need to express something, doesn't mean you need to do it right then and there, in front of the whole management team, in front of my subordinates, right in the middle of the party. Now let's wait until we're able to think rationally about this, and wait until we're able to have a constructive conversation about this. I say things that I regret. Eric? Okay, so do you want to say things that you regret?
It depends on who are you talking to.
Okay, well, the very fact that you regret it means later you say, I wish I hadn't said that. So embedded in my question is you in your rational mind, after you say it, think, you know, that probably wasn't the best thing for me to say. Wasn't the best thing for me to do. The reason you might have said it is because you were mad, you weren't thinking clearly, you were stressed, you were nervous. This is the key thing we want to avoid. Now, people who have high emotional intelligence, they don't necessarily say nice things all the time. That's a misnomer. Sometimes they say very clear things that don't seem nice, but they think carefully about the best way to communicate that. Sometimes they have to have very difficult, hard conversations. But what people with high EQ avoid is saying things that they regret. Because they always understand what's going on with them, what's going on with their audience, and the best way to communicate that. And they do not want to say things they regret. Levy.
The fact that you realize that you regret it is a sign of high EQ.
Okay. Okay. Good. The fact that you realize you regret it. Okay, fair enough. I will not argue that. So, I would say the less you can find yourself saying, I really regret that, the higher higher EQ you are. Fair enough? So it's an after the fact nuance. I often think about the ethical implications of my actions. Johnny.
I think this could be either way. It's kind of similar to what I was talking about. The fact that you're able to re-examine your decisions is a sign of high IQ. And I think for this item, it's got two sides. On the one hand, the fact that you have this mechanism where you re-examine your actions, just being cautious, that's
Sure.
how you do.
Okay.
But the fact is, the fact that you're constantly getting yourself into situations where the ethical, the ethics are a little bit.
Okay, I would agree with that. If you're constantly getting yourself into ethically difficult situations, that's potentially a problem. For this question, though, I feel like there's no implication that you are. It's just it's in the present moment. All right, I could really use this Dell computer. I want to take it home with me. But I'm going to think about the ethical implications of doing that. Right? That's stealing. Stealing is wrong. Or that, I'm really thirsty. I need to like get a drink of water. I'm gonna think about the ethical implications. And you stop yourselves from doing things that aren't ethical. So this is a high EQ person. Which category do we think it fits into? What's that?
A little bit of everything.
Okay, a little bit of everything.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yes. I would agree definitely. All this fits into a little bit of everything, but I think there's one that is especially valuable for us to discuss on this point. It's social awareness. The fact that you think about how what you do is going to affect someone else makes you socially aware, makes you have that emotional intelligence that you can empathize and understand what's going on around you. You're not someone who is just mindlessly causing trouble without realizing it for other people. I like to keep trying at worthwhile things even if I get frustrated at first. Eric.
I is high, and it's kind of side of self-awareness and emotional management.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
It's awareness of the goals, and also some patience and self-motivation.
Perfect, fantastic. This is a high EQ person. This person who's aware of their goals and their values and what's worthwhile to them. And they're not going to let a little roadblock throw them off their chosen path. My friends and family members sometimes make offhand remarks that I find intensely annoying. Second.
It's a low EQ, and I think that this is got to do with self-awareness
Okay, a little
and
stuff.
emotional management.
I'd say emotional management.
Yeah, both of them.
All right, if you go on a family vacation You know, your friends and family members are going to make offhand remarks. All right, are you going to sit in the car and be frustrated, or are you going to be able to manage that emotion? And think of a way to have a constructive conversation if necessary. I can tell when someone I'm talking with gets nervous, and I do my best to make them feel relaxed. Vanessa?
Say hi to you and have social awareness.
I'd agree. I've noticed that I have compulsive habits like biting nails or overeating, but I don't know why I have them, and I cannot seem to stop them. Jared?
Low. And I think self-awareness.
Yeah. I think low EQ, and I think self-awareness is the key point here. Right? Why am I constantly biting my nails? Let me think about why, think about what's going on that I can address that's going to decrease that anxiety. I'm aware of which types of professional situations and social situations make me feel uncomfortable. I'm aware of which types that make me feel uncomfortable. Frank?
High EQ for the self-awareness.
Yes, high EQ, self-awareness. You need to understand this. You're not necessarily going to manage all your anxiety. Your anxiety is not going to go away just because you get nervous during job interviews. But you need to understand how that affects you and how you can prepare for that later.
Would that also be a sign to some degree of low EQ, the fact that there are situations that feel uncomfortable?
I would say no, just because of what I just said, that it's understandable you're going to get nervous. In a job interview, just because you get nervous doesn't mean you have low EQ. It means you care. It means you want something. It means you have goals. It means you want to make a good impression on your audience, and you care about making a good impression on your audience. You're going to feel natural emotions. This is not a course in how we distance ourselves or strip away those natural emotions to your anxiety. This is a course in understanding that happens. How can we best deal with it? Makes sense?
Yeah, but people, let's say if you just take two people and one person is more nervous in situations and one person is more, or is not nervous, is more self-confident, wouldn't that be a sign of high EQ for that second person?
Okay, so I guess we're getting into some nuances here. So one person is more nervous. I might suggest that the person who is less nervous has gone to the EQ workshop. They know their strengths, their weaknesses. They know what they need to prepare for that job interview. They know that they have emotional management skills. If the interviewer throws them a trick question, they know they can take a deep breath and deal with that. So I might say that person has higher EQ as a result. If maybe the scenario you're posing is both people have identical EQ training, identical background, and one just happens to have a little more anxiety that registers on the EKG scale, I don't really know the answer to that.
No, but I mean, the way I would view it is, let's just say you get 1 to 100. So you don't need to be 100 to have high EQ. It's, you know.
100, what's 100?
Let's just say,
Performance?
yeah,
Or
100,
anxiety?
no, 100 would be like highest level.
Of EQ?
Yeah, I think even if somebody has high EQ, there's different levels of
Okay,
where
okay.
you are. So somebody who's, let's just say, level 100, whatever the highest level, they wouldn't be nervous. Somebody who is aware of what type of situations they're in, they may be at level 80, but they're still on the, let's say, the higher end of the EQ spectrum. Whereas somebody who's not aware at all, they would be on the lower end. Does that make sense to say?
So, what are you saying, the unaware person is not nervous?
No, the other person who's nervous, and therefore is way at the bottom.
Okay, I'm not sure what we're talking about, to be perfectly honest, but I'm just saying that this EQ understanding will decrease anxiety, in my opinion. I insist on doing things my way. Frank?
Yeah, I think it depends on the outcome. Well, you know, there are many great scientists have many important findings, and there are many successful entrepreneurs. They are doing things in back.
Mm-hmm.
So if the outcome is good,
Okay, I guess what you're saying, what if we told Steve Jobs he had to compromise?
yeah.
Right? I would not be holding an iPhone right now. Right now, do people like working with Steve Jobs? Often no. So this I put this up, and I guess the academic part of my brain wants to say this is a low EQ person, and this has to do with social management. And let's be aware of that, always. But let's keep in mind, all right, that it's good to have goals. It's good to insist on doing things that are important to you and that you're confident in. But when you're doing them, think about using some good EQ skills. Second.
I think this has a lot to do a lot with IQ too, because just like he's saying, trying to say on good entrepreneurs and scientists, they do things that are not exactly socially very recognizable many times, especially the disruptive entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
But they are much more visionary people,
Mm-hmm.
which I think the society do not understand until the results come out. Only the very few people understand them. It has a lot
Mhm.
to do with IQ.
Okay, absolutely. I would not disagree with that, but I would just say as you're doing that, realize what effect that might have on your investors, what effect that might have on the people that are working for you,
Yeah.
and how you want to manage that. I try to ignore negative feelings. Vanessa.
Say low IQ, self-awareness.
Yes, absolutely. We're going to have negative feelings. We can't stop them, but just awareness.
No, wait, hold on.
Yes.
So you have negative feelings. Okay, just a disclaimer, I'm a very low EQ.
Okay.
Okay. But I don't know if I can justify it. If you have negative feelings, isn't one way of dealing with it ignoring it? Because let's say not an important issue is going to go away if you ignore it. If you address it, it may just make it a big issue.
Okay, you could read that far into it, and I would not necessarily disagree with that. Remember the discussion Priya and I had earlier, where if you are upset by something, do you just have to tell someone about it right away, or can you compartmentalize it and say, let me deal with that later. Let me send a well thought out email in a couple of days, or let me have a conversation next time I see that person face to face. Let me think about doing it that way. Just completely ignoring it. Maybe you're still going to be mad about that, but you're just trying to completely ignore it. And if you're still mad about it, it's going to express itself somehow. I would suspect. All right, good discussion though. Good job thinking of those nuances. I think people usually have selfish or bad intentions.
It's a low EQ.
Low EQ. Which category would you put it in?
Self-awareness. Social management.
Social management. All right, I think low EQ, social management. So if every time someone bumps into you on an elevator, do you naturally think they're doing that to make you mad? Or do you realize, oh, they didn't see me there. Oh, they have this perspective and that's just the way everyone fit into the elevator. I'm not going to jump to think that everyone's out to get me just because of an action that got in my way. Vanessa.
It's actually just a question, I think, where the categories get a little bit blurrier. Seeing is that, let's say someone is aware of a negative attribute, right? That implies a bit of self-awareness. It's saying that I am acknowledging that there's something negative here. But then where it gets a little murky is, well, if I'm aware that this is a negative attribute, doesn't that imply that I have some level of emotional intelligence? I think that's where, based on what I'm hearing everybody ask questions about, that's where it's a little bit blurry. It's like, okay, well, if I'm aware that it's negative, then I get credit for being at least a little bit emotionally intelligent because I recognize that. You understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Not, I wanted to,
I get what you're saying. That's what I was trying to say. Is
Yeah,
levels
I
in
can
it.
tell that's what you were trying to get at. So one of the categories that you had is social management,
Okay.
self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. One of the
Emotional
categories of emotional EQ is self-awareness.
okay.
And what I gathered from where most of our questions were coming from is, if I am aware of a negative attribute, that means that I am expressing some level of emotional intelligence because I'm aware of it, right? Whereas if you completely ignore it,
Okay.
you understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like, that's where I get a little fuzzy.
I feel like the opposite will be, you think everybody's nice and they will always caring to you, so it'll be the extreme. Actually, the realistic way is actually in the middle. You realize there will be good intentions and bad intentions, a mixed thing. So if you are both trained, you'll probably will be low EQ. A more balanced approach will be high EQ.
So Vanessa, maybe we could go back to one of these. Is it this one we can talk more carefully about, or is there another one we can use as a template for this discussion?
There was one thing I don't.
Okay, I'd say things that I regret.
Okay,
That-
good. I like
Right,
that.
we know that it's negative, obviously you don't want to be in that situation. But at the same time, that individual is recognizing, right?
Sure.
Which means that they're somewhat self-aware.
Okay.
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 I think what I'm trying to get clarity on is how do we differentiate, because the person is aware that it's negative.
Okay. So if we go to the workshop and realize all the crappy things we've done in our professional lives,
Yeah.
that makes us self-aware. So just because we have a long list of things that we wish we had done differently,
Right.
doesn't mean we're low EQ. In fact, it means we're high EQ.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can bring it from, I mean, a lot of people, when some people are just hot-headed, they just say right away. But then they're not low on EQ because immediately they realize that, hey, I shouldn't have said that.
Okay.
But it's just the mindset that they had at that point.
Okay, but when they got hot-headed, they lost rational thought.
Yeah, so at that point they are low EQ, but then I think immediately they get on a high point. And I think that's the thing. As a person, you can't say low IQ or high IQ.
Okay, so you're saying because they realized that it was a bad thing, they have a certain level of EQ.
Right.
That's what I was trying to get at, is
Yeah.
like,
I will not argue that.
okay.
I will not argue that. But that person could definitely benefit from an EQ workshop.
Oh, absolutely.
How to manage it immediately.
Let me give you an example. I was at this weird thing happened at a party I was at last weekend, an Oscars party. And after the Oscars, there was about maybe 10, 12 of us in the room, all friends of the host named Alyssa. She was discussing something about the dynamics of what Chris Rock was saying, yada yada. And someone said something, and then she said something, and then her friend of like 10 years got up, got really mad, and said, "You know what, Alyssa? F you cut me off. I'm out of here." And he storms out. This is like her best friend in front of, 9 or 10 of her other friends, says F you at the end of her party that she hosts at the Oscars. And then 30 seconds later, he comes back, he's like, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I shouldn't have done that. So it's good that you recognize that. But do you think I'm inviting that guy to my Oscars party?
So in that case, we would still qualify as being low EQ.
Yes.
Okay. I think the example.
You don't want to stand up and say F you, even if you say you're sorry 30 seconds later.
Credibility at that point. Even as a manager setting, if you think.
What if you did something like that in a business meeting?
Right.
Is someone going to hire you to stand up in front of their investors?
Right.
Is someone going to hire you to represent them?
Yeah, I think the level of EQ that people recognize that they say regrettable things, the level of their EQ is only high compared to people who are completely oblivious. We say something that's inappropriate.
Okay, yes,
and then
I like it.
carry on
So
their
there's
day.
3 categories. There are people very low IQ, EQ, who don't realize what they did was wrong. There are people who do things that are irrational and kill their careers and their social interactions, but then they realize afterwards why it happened. And then there are people who don't lose their temper and interact with a way that makes people invite them back to their Oscar party and hire them for jobs.
I think it's much more digestible, because then you're like, wait, if I'm self-aware, then that implies that I have some EQ. So I like a category of like either high or low instead of just non-existent, because then it's like, wait, that is.
Okay, fair enough. What do you think, Debbie? Does that work in?
Well, that's what kind of what you just said.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to figure out that middle.
So we've got none, I'll put none.
Okay, none.
None.
I think everyone who's in this class is hovering somewhere in the middle, and we're trying to elevate ourselves. Whereas the bottom category, I think they're just beyond reaction. so they're in denial. They're completely oblivious to the fact that they they rub people the wrong way. So I think and the thing is, they probably constitute a very small percentage of the general public. So
Okay.
so it's a sort of irrelevant population.
Good point, Johnny. All right, so now we have 3 categories. Instead of just high and low, we have none, low, and high. So how about this one? I think people will disagree. If I think people will disagree with me, I don't express my opinion.
You're in total control.
If I think people will disagree with me, I don't express my. All right, we got one vote for highest. We got one vote for low.
I am highest.
No, I think we're seeing sort of split. All right, let's hear from the lows. Who wants to make that argument? Letty.
Well, you should have self-confidence. Just because nobody agrees with you doesn't mean your opinion is not worth anything.
Yeah. You should be able to express yourself in a socially acceptable way. You need to develop those skills to understand that your audience may disagree with you. I can empathize with your desire to disagree with me, but here's why it's important to me that I express this. Anyone want to make the argument for high?
Well, I could make an argument for high, although.
You know what? Let me stop this. I like the argument for low. I understand that there's some gray area that we need to control that. If we're really mad, all right, if we just completely disagree and we realize that our audience is just not going to hear, we need to be able to say, okay.
That's the thing, you know, I was thinking if you're
not-
in a meeting with CEO of a company, let's say, and you're trying to make a case, a business case, let's say you want some budget or whatever. But if you see that the other person is not willing to budge from his or her point, I mean, you have to soak it in and you have to say, hey, I need to control my.
That sounds like a high EQ person to me. All right, but someone that just says, I just never express myself because people will disagree with me, that's a low EQ person. I practice activities that help me understand my feelings, such as keeping a diary, talking with friends, etc. High, which area?
I feel like self-management.
Self-awareness. Self-awareness, yeah, we need to understand. I find it hard to be patient. Low, which category? Same. Again, everything is a little emotional, everything is a little self-awareness, but I think emotional management is the key for our academic discussion. We hit a little road bump. I didn't get into business school this year. All right, am I going to give up? Or am I going to be patient? Okay, great. So that's a great discussion. I think it seems like you have a good understanding of how we can take this abstract subject of emotional intelligence and quantify it in things that will be useful to you from a business standpoint and from a social standpoint. We're going to talk a little bit about some techniques you can use to develop emotional intelligence. Before we get to that, we're going to talk about the key, as far as Daniel Goleman is concerned, to controlling emotional intelligence is avoiding what he calls an emotional hijack. This emotional hijack is none other than the fight, flight, or freeze response. Adrenaline goes through your body. You recognize some threat to your physical safety. Let me ask you. This is a natural reaction which we will experience all the time. You're not a low EQ person just because you go into this reaction. You go into this reaction because you feel scared. The question I want to ask you is, when is this reaction good in the sense that it's going to help you with your social and professional management? When is this reaction bad in the sense that it is going to hurt you? Fight, flight, or freeze. It all happens to us all. When is it good? When is it bad? Jerry.
I think it's good when you're in a dangerous situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's good when you're in a dangerous situation. And by dangerous situation, your physical safety is in jeopardy. You need to lift something really heavy because there's a baby underneath it. You want that little extra adrenaline going through your body. And I would say it's bad all the other times. When you're in a board meeting, your physical safety is not in danger. So you need to be able to keep calm. You're in a job interview, the interviewer is not going to throw a spear at you from across the desk, and you're not going to need to be able to use that extra adrenaline and oxygen pumping through your muscles to dodge out of the way. but you want to keep control of your mental function so you can answer her or his questions as effectively as possible. So when your life is in danger, this is a good response. When's the last time anyone's life was in danger? Hopefully not recently. We're fortunate to live in a world where we don't have our physical safety threatened very often. But we do experience this reaction a lot, and it hurts us. Adrenaline goes through our body, oxygen utilized for this response, this life or death situation. Something called the amygdala, which is a processing center in our brain, focuses on the one thing that is the threat to our safety, and we lose our ability to consider multiple variables. Duration varies. Let's talk about duration. How long does this last? Wait a minute, didn't I have a duration thing? All right, let's come back to duration. Let me just talk about some of the brain chemistry that Daniel Goleman simplifies for us. When we see some dangerous thing and we go into this emotional hijack, suppose we are a hiker enjoying a nice spring or fall day in the outdoors, getting some fresh air. We're walking along and we see this big, scary snake. We see that snake visually. Very quickly, that message is sent to something called the visual thalamus, which tells us, oh, that's a snake. And then, as we process that rationally, that information goes to our cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex is the part of the brain where we think rational. Has anyone heard have you ever heard someone say, oh, she or he is very cerebral? You're so cerebral. It means you think rationally. It's the brainy part of your brain where rational decisions are made. You make a rational decision about how you're going to approach that snake in front of you. You send that information to this processing center, which is called the amygdala. The amygdala says, okay, the best thing to do is step back slowly. That information is translated down to your spinal cord, your muscles. You walk back slowly from that snake. So that's what we hope happens. We see the snake, that information goes to the cerebral cortex, goes to the amygdala, all the instructions of how to handle that situation in the best way possible. Now, there's another part of our brain, you may have heard called the lizard brain, the more primitive brain, which works faster. It works faster than the cerebral cortex. In which case, this information about the snake does not go through the cerebral cortex. It's transferred immediately to the amygdala, and the amygdala sends instructions down the spinal cord of how to handle that dangerous situation. So, there are pros and cons here. Let's talk about this shorter path, which happens much faster. Let's talk about the pluses and minuses of this. When would this reaction, going straight to the amygdala, be good? When would this reaction, going straight to the amygdala, be bad? Yeah.
I feel like if you see and just start screaming, or it may actually rouse that snake and attack you. So that may be a bad situation.
Okay. Yes, Priya?
I think if you're taking the shorter route, you're probably not making a rational decision.
Yes.
And that's probably not so good.
You're skipping the rational part of your brain. And that's usually not good. And if you don't need the rational part of your brain, if you just need to run really, really fast, then it's a good thing. Or you need to lift something that's really, really heavy because the baby's suffocating, then maybe it's a good thing. But you do not want to skip the rational part of your brain. Now, if you do skip the rational part of your brain, it's not going to take you very long to realize you did something irrational. It's going to take you maybe a second, 30 seconds. Man, I really shouldn't have said F you to that person. That was a bad idea. So when I say this happens much faster, milliseconds. This happens in, I don't know, 1,000th of a second, and this happens in 1 second. I'm just throwing those numbers out of thin air, but it's something like that. So we want to engage our cerebral cortex. We do not want to go into this emotional hijack unless what? Your life is in danger. Thankfully, our life is rarely in danger. Duration of this emotional hijack has different parts. Immediately, you will see this threat, and you could be in an emotional hijack until the threat is resolved. Either you've run really far away from the snake, or you've recognized that this is not a life-threatening situation, and you start to calm down. Your compromised working memory, according to the Institute for Health and Human Potential, will be compromised for 18 minutes. Remember that concept I mentioned earlier? You lose your ability to consider multiple variables because your amygdala is so focused on the one thing that is posing this threat to your physical safety. This effect lasts 18 minutes according to the Institute for Health and Human Potential. So 18 minutes after the interview, you'll think, God, why didn't I say that this was the management experience I had? I forgot about that because I thought she was going to throw a spear at me. Physical toxicity, this adrenaline that goes through your body, lasts several hours, 3 to 4 hours. At the end of the day, you may say, gosh, I need to go to the bar and get a drink because I'm still like, even though the threat is gone, even though that review is over, I still just have this feeling, this physical toxicity. And lastly, because I like being dramatic and putting forever, there is an aspect of emotional distress that can last forever. All right, if you have a really bad experience with the guys in the copy office and you spend the next 20 years not wanting to go down there and talk with them because you've never really acknowledged or figured out how you can communicate more effectively with them, then this doesn't go away. So we want to avoid this emotional hijack. Let me go over a quick method of how you can think about avoiding the emotional hijack. The triple B method for avoiding emotional hijack. Break the pattern, buy time, build context. Break the pattern. We have a physiological reaction going on where your amygdala says your life is in danger. Stop that pattern. Breathe. You'll hear it over and over again. It's a good thing to do. Breathing helps us by slowing down our heart rate, decreasing the amount of adrenaline running through our body. There's a physiological reason to take some deep breaths. Stop. Right? If you're screaming because you see the snake, realize that that reaction is going on because the emotional hijack has been triggered. Stop whatever behavior you're doing. Right? When you stand up to say F you to the host, you may have a couple seconds. You may have a couple seconds to realize, okay, my muscles are all tense. Oh, I remember in emotional intelligence class when my muscles get all tense and when I stand up and when I say something, that means I'm going to do something irrational. Stop and try to get back into your rational brain. Buy time. You need some time. Maybe just a couple of seconds. If I'm in the middle of a speech and someone asks me a question that throws me off, I can take some time. It may be better than just giving an off-the-cuff answer because I'm nervous that I may not know, or you think I'm unqualified because I don't have an answer ready for you right away. I can take a breath, say, let me think about that for a minute. That's a great question. I could also say, let me get back to you on that question. That is worthy of further analysis. Avoid making commitments. Say, let me process this. My first job as a manager, I used that all the time. I said, let me think this through, and I'll get back to you. Let me process that vacation request, and we'll figure it out. And lastly, build context. Is this a threat to your life? Or is this something that your cerebral brain is better suited to manage? Count backwards from 100 by 3. It's an interesting technique. It just takes a little bit of rational thought. 100, 97, 94, 91. Gets you in that cerebral brain. Just a little bit of challenge could buy you some time to think carefully and calm down. Determined threat, we talked about. Right, is this person going to jump across the desk and stab me with a knife? Or are they just challenging me professionally? In which case I need all my mental faculties. All right. Triple B method, break the pattern, buy time, build context. Okay, so how do we improve our emotional intelligence? 3 ways. Analysis, which you've been doing. Techniques, I just showed you one technique, the triple B method for dealing with emotional hijack. And practice. We'll do more practice next time, where we'll think about some exercises that are designed to trigger an emotional hijack, and we'll think about how we can use some of the techniques that we'll finish going over today. Let's see, where do we go? I want to do some things with this self-awareness worksheet. Let's just start very, very briefly with some stuff on the self-awareness worksheet, and then we will take a break in the midst of that. And then we will, in the second half of class, finish the self-awareness worksheet. Okay, so for the self-awareness worksheet, let me see, where we go for a second. The first thing I wanted to mention is maybe you could jot down very quickly some goals. So I'm going to explain these first 2 pages, and then I'm going to ask you to take maybe 5 minutes to think about some answers, and then we're going to take a break, and then you're going to come back, take another 5 minutes, and then we're going to go over what this means to our analysis. So let's turn to actually the 3rd page, which is the emotional hijack trigger worksheet. What I would like you to do is think about three times, 3 occasions where you went into emotional hijack. And this was not the fight or flight because your life was in danger. This is what we're calling an emotional hijack. This meant you went into that reaction, but not because your life was in danger. Think about 3 times that happened. And then you're going to go through each of those 3 questions. The first is you're going to ask yourself, was there any threat to your physical well-being? And the answer to that is going to be no. It's just a reminder. Because if the answer to that is yes, then that's a whole different situation. And it was good that you went into that emotional hijack. Now, the next question, in what way did you feel threatened? Professionally, financially, socially? Now, just because your life was not in danger, that does not mean you were not threatened. There was a reason you got nervous. Your professional credibility may have been on the line. You thought you were going to lose a lot of money. You thought socially no one was going to want to talk to you as a result of this interaction. Think about the reason, the way you felt threatened. And then thirdly, think about the broad category of event. If you can quantify this somehow into a category. Was this a supervisor subordinate type of situation where you get nervous when you were talking to your manager? Was this a family situation? Was this some sort of financial discussion? As you reflect on these 3 times you went into an emotional hijack, how can you start to categorize things that put you in that state? And then in terms of the previous worksheet, the goal worksheet, I'm not going to have you fill it out now, but I will tell you the reason I put that is because I want you to think of this in terms of accomplishing your goals. Just like Goleman teaches us emotional intelligence in terms of effective job performance, I want you to think about how these emotional hijack situations prevented you from accomplishing your goals. So whatever you were trying to accomplish, give some thought to how this emotional hijack prevented you from accomplishing that or led to difficulties in accomplishing that. So that's just why I put that on. But we're running a little behind, so you don't need to fill out your goals too thoroughly. What I do want you to do is think about these 3 times you went into an emotional hijack situation, and think about the 3 questions associated with each. And just if you could, let's remain seated, and as questions come up, just fire them out. Let's take about 3-4 minutes where there's not a lot of chaos with people running around the room, and then I'll give you a full, healthy break time after that. So take a couple minutes to come up with three situations.
the goals? Do you want to? You said that you didn't want us to write it down yet.
Just keep them in the back of your head and realize that the reason why emotional intelligence helps us is because it will help you accomplish those once you write them down. All right, is this exercise making sense? Does everyone think they'll be able to come up with 3 situations where your life is not actually in danger, but you went into this emotional hijack? And you can ruminate a little bit on what category you put that into. Any questions about this? Liv? Okay, so is there a time at work where you got really stressed out?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Remind you of your most painful moments at work.
Yeah, but it wasn't it was the flight or freeze kind of response that I had.
Okay.
Is any event that triggers a strong emotion, like, is that what you're talking about?
Well,
I mean, there was a strong emotion triggered, but I wouldn't say it went to the extent of.
okay. Now, the reason I asked you to explain it is it may not have been something that happened in a split second. It may have been something that stressed you out for a couple of hours. And while that was going on, maybe you were tempted to write a nasty email. Maybe you were tempted to say, I'm just going to give up with this job. Maybe there's something we could find there. I don't know, maybe you could think of a presentation you gave.
No, if you put it in that context, that could be problem.
Okay, great. All right, so good. Let's give you a couple minutes to finish that and then take your break for 10 minutes. So let's meet back here at 2:35 and we'll start the second half of the class. Like an ongoing kind of situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you were stressed out the whole time. As long as you're stressed out. Got it.
I'm close to engineering school and working
Got it. Okay. So
people are like scientists. Here I go.
It's like project.
okay. So I think that's a good start. Maybe a specific time, like orientation, where you just feel like I'm nervous. First semester, first day of class. All right, so this is also good analysis. So maybe the first semester you just didn't feel confident talking to people. That's good. And maybe if there's a specific situation where someone would have been a great professional colleague where you should have talked to them. You're like, oh, I'm new and I'm nervous.
Yeah,
so I
did the most thing I did.
yeah. So okay. So nervous about approaching someone. Do you ask for a job in person? Okay, so you just were kind of in this state, which was ultimately detrimental to your career. I think that's great. All right, I'm going to rest.
like research in financial modeling and then,
Financial modeling is important.
yeah, like, I think that's a tool, like when you merge and apply two companies together, how, you know, after the transaction, the financial performance will look like, you have to make projections, and you have to see if this really gonna have the factory performance and your capital, the company's involved out. So, strategic management, the one that we take.
Oh, they do?
Strategic management.
Okay.
It's a
The right concept and how you
Four
get
bags left.
what's the synergy.
Oh, is it? Let's see.
Company.
If I could still have one.
And I think there's also a merger and acquisition class, like actually what's the mainstream goal, what's on the, how you can structure the merger and acquisition. You use equities, you use debts, do you pay cash, do you actually exchange ownership? So,
What about advanced financial management?
I didn't take that class, so I cannot speak, I can ask them.
I asked Frank yesterday and he said advanced financial management, financial modeling, and he would also hold an accounting class, decoding of corporate finances. I mean, all of them.
I would just say, they are not really specific. I think it would be very important if you're going to finance, no matter if it's in the acquisition or not, recording of account statements is always important. And the other ones, finance management, so I feel like it's more wider scope, and may not be just targeting specific for the acquisition. But the modeling is because there's one model, one semester's course was targeting a merger and acquisition model. So that's why I pulled that one up. There's a class in merger and acquisition. And the structure management, I thought that's also very important. And also, I think we have a.
Which one? Strategic management?
Yeah, negotiation.
Negotiations.
Probably take four courses.
So negotiations, financial modeling, strategic management, and advanced financial management.
Strategic management, financial modeling, negotiation, and there's a merger and acquisition class.
Yeah, I don't think I have time to take so much because I'm already like, I think by the time I graduate, I'll have 70 papers. And everything is very new for me. So I'm trying to, like when I'm entering into the industry, I'm trying to, like I've already finished research and development in a position, quality, process engineering, and product function. Now I'm doing operations and supply chain, and I'm also trying to market, finance, accounting, and marketing
I feel that's
all
like
together.
financial modeling. I think what you want to do at school is something that takes time for other people to put them together to get solid. And you can do it by yourself. It takes you a much longer time because you don't have the right access to the material, you don't have the time or approach to it. If that's the case, I feel like I would have to take strategic management because the case you brought to the class were very relevant and you have been thinking through using these brain to help you process it. So it's like something you would really benefit. But the other things like skills, you can teach yourself. Maybe a financial model. You may go to certain YouTube where they teach you some of the ways to use Excel to do a
But
model.
financial modeling is part of the finance curriculum and part of the finance specialization, right?
I think so, yes. Right. So I think it's a way of teach. Whatever you can teach yourself, you can make it
Yeah.
out of this school.
There's just so many things in my, I'm doing everything new in business school. It's a lot for me.
When once you decide really like, well maybe after you, what's your something you can do?
I don't know.
Or you have an outline? Maybe after Ethan you would know like really what you want to do.
No, I think intern does not matter to me. I mean, for what I want to do, because I'm going to do intern in supply chain management or strategy. But eventually I want to not just do supply chain management or operations.
Well, I just feel like Ethan is doing things to filter out things you don't want to do.
Yeah. Because the thing is that, I mean, I'm international status, so they don't even get that by most places.
You know, and although I think you will learn at work, you may still change your option later. You will do different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm open, but still like, having a vision and, the goal and what are the things you need to do. getting from investment banking to corporate finance. That's your goal.
I'm not sure exactly what the pattern is, but that's what I'm trying to see my interest first and see how I like that. Now I'm trying to go back to finance, blah, blah, blah.
我去找。
我老公说好吃，老公就是说把他之后把老公叫回来，然后还吃了一些退烧药，睡了一会儿吧，然后吃一下。对呀。
Beaver。你生病还是小孩子生病？
小孩生病，我生病我就不会知道，小孩生病才会知道。大有老大。
Like my corporate memo, I think you said that I didn't talk about the
Time frame.
Okay.
Okay, I don't remember exactly what happened. Did I say something like, if you'd given a time frame, that may have given more information, which would have decreased anxiety?
Like you didn't say that, but like you said that I didn't talk about the time frame or something like that.
I don't remember, but you can email me, you can come see me, we can talk about it further afterwards, or you can talk about it before class next time. And I can look specifically at it. What's that?
Like if I can talk about it next time.
Okay. We can talk about it afterwards,
Sorry.
and I can pull it up and look at it.
Afterwards,
Yeah. Today. You want to do that?
开始运气了。
我都只有开始去。
第一个没有很强。
All right, let's go ahead and get started.
Harry.
Now, this next section of classwork is extremely important. It's thinking about how you can take these moments of sheer panic and categorize them in a way that's going to help you in the future. So what do we come up with for these emotional hijack events? Let me just hear some examples. Let's think how we can get these into a broad category of event. That third question on each example, broadly describe the category of event. For example, deadline, manager, social interaction, conflict. That's where we're going with this. We want to think of this category of event that triggers emotional hijack, so I'm going to be aware of that.
One of my examples was professional. So I had a brand new supervisor who, while my manager was like on some sort of a leave, he was overlooking I would have done it differently than that.
Wow. So quit. So that's an emotional hijack that lasted a while.
Actually, no, the company called me back the next day and gave me an offer and made me come back. It actually ended up working out pretty nicely, but
Oh.
I just wish that I would have controlled myself better because there were a lot of things that I said before I said I quit.
Oh, like you said you're not doing your job and you're like,
Yeah, I told her about myself and then I was like, I'm out. And then,
and then you just walked out right
yeah,
then.
but of course the relationship between he and I for the next year was like very tumultuous.
Wow, okay. Okay, so someone threatens your professional credibility in a way that you disagree with. I think that would seem to be the category there. So that's just something for you to be aware of,
Yeah.
right? Next time someone threatens your professional credibility, it doesn't mean they're right. It means that they're a new person figuring this out. It means that their management is probably not going to support them if push comes to shove. So let me just think this through, because it may not work out as well as it worked out last time if I start going off on this management. Great.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about a case that not long ago I was trying to interview for my summer intern, and then the question it given to me about like should I expand the plans like a total out of blue because I never prepared for this. I prepared for behavior questions, I prepared for financial questions, but now like such a hypothetical question. So I feel like I've been going back and forward with the only words I know, like NPV and cash flow discounts, like for a couple of minutes. And then once I got out of the office, when I was driving home, I said, yeah, I should have said this and that and that. I started listing things I could, answer the question. And
Okay, so they asked you a question that was not related to finance?
it's not what I prepared, it's finance, but
Okay.
it's more like a hypothetical, give you a case and you try to answer. So I wasn't prepared for the situation. I was more like knowledge-based facts things.
Great example. So you were asked a question that you hadn't specifically studied for.
Right.
So a number of interesting things going on there. Remember we mentioned this idea of working memory being compromised for 18 minutes? In 18 minutes when she's driving home, she realizes, oh, I didn't realize that point A could connect with B and C, and that would have been the way to answer that question.
Right.
So in terms of the category, it might have been a question that you weren't prepared for. Threw you off.
But I also feel it's because the interview, the pressure gives you theories. If you probably during the discussion, you probably will be thinking more clearly.
Okay, so you know multiple things just by filling out that worksheet. One, you know that interviews tend to stress you out.
Right.
And they put you in a situation, specifically sometimes, where if you get asked a question that you haven't specifically prepared for, that might put you in a difficult emotional state. So you need to think about, instead of saying, I don't know the answer, or instead of whatever you did, taking a breath, break the pattern, buy time, build the context. Other examples. Helen.
Before I came to this program, when I was in China, I had to quit my job, but it's not that easy because I had to ask my boss to sign the signature on the agreements and that. But unfortunately, my boss was on the business travel for maybe a couple of weeks. But I've already bought my flight ticket and I rent my apartment here. So, maybe I have to delay all my plan. Something like that. So I'm very worried about if my boss cannot, go back and sign on that agreement, maybe everything is ruined.
Oh, okay. So when you found out that their approval may have been jeopardized, you went into an emotional hijack.
Right.
Okay, so this is, how do we categorize that event? Work with me. How do we categorize, what we've done, I think, I like the first two examples. We've got categories of events where you can be aware of. You can say, all right, this is a situation where I need to take a breath. Use the triple B method to avoid emotional hijack. How do we categorize this event?
Part of it is financial problem because I bought everything.
Okay, financial problems, logistics. It also has to do with patience and flexibility. as well. Maybe, oh, I had this plan all worked out, and all of a sudden there's this wrench. I need to be patient, resilient, have some flexibility. So,
Isn't this also something related to not having things under her control?
okay.
She couldn't control his travel. She couldn't control when it's going to be signed. So things like that. It's out of her control.
Yes. So we recognize that it's out of our control. Maybe things that are out of your control make you nervous?
Right.
Can we say that? Let's keep chewing on this one and maybe come back to it. All right, what else?
Yeah, I did instance where I was given a project that the time limit was shorter than usual, and also I didn't know what to, like I haven't done anything like that before.
Perfect. All right, let me stop you there and then hear a little bit more details. All right, so Jerry's got time limit shorter than he's used to and unknown stuff
Yeah.
or just tasks that you haven't
Yeah.
completed before. So those are two things that might trigger an emotional hijack.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do if I throw something at you and say, Jerry, I want this done in 2 days, and you know it's going to take a week, and it's something you've never done before?
Well, first I would, sometimes it is my manager, maybe I just tell them that, that it takes a week, or maybe negotiate.
Okay, all right, well, maybe the first thing you
ask
might
for
do
help.
is use the triple B method to avoid an emotional hijack.
Yeah. Take breaths.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, let me take a breath. Let me buy some time before I negotiate with this manager.
Yeah.
All right, and let me think of the most rational way to explain to this manager that it's going to take a week rather than 2 days.
Or asking for additional help from other people. if necessary.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I like that we're able to categorize that, and that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Something shorter time period puts you in emotional hijack. Other things, what else? Great.
So I had a situation where it was a time-sensitive project, and halfway through so me and my manager were working very closely on the project, and halfway through the project, what we worked on, suddenly my manager comes to me and says that in conversation with his manager, today he figured out that this is not the way we're going to take, and we're going to go a different route. And which means all the work that we have done so far is completely stripped out.
Okay.
And so I really had to solve that in, and it wasn't really the ideal situation. I know I have another maybe few weeks to finish up the project, otherwise it's going to look bad on me. But then I wasn't obviously happy with the way it was handled.
What did you do when you found out? What were you tempted to do? Because you probably managed it pretty well.
Right. So at that point, I obviously I had to solve that in, and then I wasn't happy. But then to make the best use of the rest of the time, we had to sit down together again and said, at this point, that we need to decide what is the clear direction.
Okay.
And so we took it.
So when you sat down with this person, was there some tension there?
So I knew that when I got a call early in the morning, or right when I went to work, I was at a different meeting, and then I got this that, can you call me for a few minutes? I said, I'll be back within such and such time, but if it's an urgent, I can call you. He's like, yeah, just give me a call for a few minutes. And I knew that there was something important that he wants to discuss with me, and at that point he said, he apologized that he didn't know what was the correct way of taking it forward, but then only today he came to know, and he knew that it would have a big implication on my completion of the project.
What I'm digging for, is there anything that you did that was counterproductive? And I feel like in this situation, it sounds like something you handled very, very well, even though it was a pain.
Yeah. So it was.
But the value here is, what did you do that was counterproductive, and how can you think about not doing that next step?
I don't know. At that point, probably, I don't know if I had shown my emotions that I was not happy, but probably, he got the message from whatever when I was sitting down with him. But
That you were mad?
Well, not mad, but probably not the happiest situation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds like that was a successfully managed situation.
Sure.
But also, what you could learn from it, from the EQ standpoint, is
Yeah.
when you put a lot of work into something, and then someone just erases that somehow because of some sort of change, that's a situation that can be prone to an emotional hijack. So when that sort of change happens, you need to make sure you're not around any sharp objects. Or use the triple B method to just think carefully. Okay, good. Other? Johnny? Got anything for us? Alright. Josh, you got something, right, Josh?
I guess I don't know exactly if this fits, but the first time I was in front of a panel of judges, they started a question, and I knew that I was going to have to answer questions about what I was presenting to them. But they started to ask increasingly specific questions, and then I flubbed a couple of references into where what specific pages and things were on, and I started to get really anxious about it, and everything kind of snowballed from there in terms of my thought process. It wasn't until I got a break because they started to ask the opposing counsel some questions that I was able to kind of reset myself and find all the references that I was trying to make where they actually were.
Okay. Great. All right, so how do we broadly categorize that event? And I might say it's not necessarily talking to judges. I think there's something broader you can put into that. Anyone want to help us out? What's the category of event that may have caused an emotional hijack? Maybe it would be specific questions. It also might be when you made a mistake. So when you made a mistake that had to do with your professional credibility, was that what sent things into?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the quicksand feeling started there. Now I'm struggling against something that I creation almost, but it's I gotta get myself out.
Yes, I mean I think that's great information, and I think we can all sympathize with that, right? If you're in an interview, you're in some sort of presentation, and you say something where immediately in your head goes up, oh my God, that was wrong, or maybe they know it was wrong and they're judging me, that can be a difficult situation. All right, so it's too bad that happened, but when you've done some analysis, you might draw your attention to the fact that when that happens, you don't want to create that quicksand feeling and make it even worse. You want to do something to let yourself reset, like talk to opposing counsel, ask a question that gives you a moment to breathe, ask the students a question. And this sounds like something that I've experienced before. And one way to decrease my anxiety when I feel like I got off course and said something wrong is engage one of the participants in the workshop I'm conducting or ask a student a question. I mean, I get nervous up here sometimes. So sometimes when I ask you questions, it's just because I want a little bit of a chance to reflect, collect my thoughts, think about where I am. So I love the way we were able to quantify that. There's a specific category that, yeah, it's too bad it happened, but it could lead to something worse if you don't acknowledge it. All right, what do you come up with, Letty?
Well, I don't specifically want to share what I came up with, but
It was bad.
no, it wasn't bad, it's just personal.
Okay.
But afterwards, I was just looking at them and I realized all the things that triggered it was like, well, all the three were instances where I got a phone call or an email and I found out some information.
Okay, so you found that information that was upsetting.
Yeah.
So how would you broadly describe the categories? Was it information that threatened you financially? Was it information that undermined all your work you'd just done over the past 3 weeks, like pre-admission? Was it information that you had done something wrong and then you felt like it was going to create a quicksand?
Let's just say socially.
Okay. So, you've done something wrong socially? you've been judged socially?
Judge socially, yeah.
Okay, so you've been being judged socially. And we talked about this with anxiety and giving a presentation. We get nervous because we're being judged. Maybe professionally, maybe socially, because no one's going to want to hang out with us. And that's good information to think about. That's something that can put you in an emotional hijack. So you don't want to make it worse and stand up at the party and say, F you, I'm out of here. You want to realize, okay, I'm a little tense. Let me just take a breath, use the triple B method. All right, great. So, the most important part to that exercise, I think, is this broad category of events. How can you understand that there are certain categories of events, certain relationships, certain environments that make you more prone to emotional hijack, and think about what you can do to reach an effective resolution to that. So that brings us to the next 2 pages on the self-assessment worksheet. One is the potentially dangerous environment, and the next one is the potentially dangerous relationship. So let's think about the 3 examples you came up with in the first exercise, and think about what sort of environments might be dangerous in terms of an emotional hijack for you. And some of the environments I heard were job interviews. Did we hear any other environments? I know we heard some different difficult relationships. We heard about relationships with a new boss. We heard about relationships with an audience who might be judging us. I guess, depends on how we quantify this. But yeah, but let's think about how we can put those 3 events into a potentially dangerous environment, potentially dangerous relationship. And let's think about 3 things with each of those environments or relationships. 1, behavioral limitations. What happens to your behavior because you go into emotional hijack? I heard, I don't think of the right answer, even if I know the right answer from Yanni. I heard a quicksand feeling from Josh. I heard lack of rational thinking from Vanessa. Next question, what sort of warning signs do we get when we're in this dangerous situation or in this dangerous relationship? Is there something that happens before we stand up and say, I quit? That can cue us to something bad is coming. Heart rate increases, feeling of social judgment, feeling of quicksand. You'll recognize that quicksand feeling when it comes again. You're like, oh, this is happening. So instead of saying something to make it worse, I'm going to do what I did last time to reset. And that brings us to the 3rd point, positive actions. What should we do instead of standing up and saying, I quit? So with these next 2, we're thinking about these broad categories of events that we got in the first exercise. And how does that fit into potentially dangerous environments and potentially dangerous relationships? How does it limit, in each of those, think of the 3 things. How does that limit our behavior? What are the warning signs that will tip me off that an emotional hijack is going to lead me into a counterproductive action? And what should we do instead of positive actions? So take a couple minutes to try to collect those. We'll discuss the same way, because this is the takeaway. What should we do instead of standing up and say, I quit?
class or leave the whole class.
Yours, what are dangerous relationships that could put you in an emotional agitation? All right, how are we coming on this? Need some more time? Ready to start a little discussion? So the more we can quantify what's happening, how, and when, and why, the more effectively we'll be able to use this stuff. What do we got for potentially dangerous relationships? Relationships like with other people. My thought on that.
I by the environment.
Oh, okay, fine. We can skip ahead to environment. Do you need some more? Let's discuss for a minute, see what we have so far, and I'll give you a few more minutes if necessary. This is one of the kind of thing I would definitely encourage you to continue thinking about after this class, but while it's fresh in your mind, while we have a minute to discuss it with each other, this is the kind of analysis where it's helpful just to do it, get a little bit done before it completely loses, before your focus is on something else. So what do we get for potentially dangerous environments? Yeah.
I was going to talk about the relationship.
Oh, relationships. Sorry, all right. So we've got a dangerous relationship. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the case I have with my coworker or something, or actually my supervisor, something morally that I don't agree with what he's doing.
Okay. So it's a relationship with an immoral
Like immoral supervisor.
supervisor. Okay. Immoral supervisor. Okay. So hopefully you won't have to encounter that too much. Hopefully it's a situation that you could distance yourself from and or call the SEC and or
I don't think SEC will care about that situation, but what I found out is my working environment actually is not the only case. At the previous company I worked for, there are similar cases that actually make me even more frustrated. That the thing I feel is important and I think was not held firmly by the firm. So I think my behavior limitation is, or I stop performing and I kind of look for a way out.
Okay, we're still talking about the immoral supervisor?
Yeah, after I figure out he's not
Okay.
really a moral standard.
Okay, good. All right. So this is an interesting one. This is an immoral supervisor. They're definitely doing something wrong. But your reaction to that is to stop performing. which could sometimes hurt you.
Right. That's feel like I was also looking for a way out. Like I don't want to work for that company anymore because I feel like if that case is not a single case, it's actually people are tolerant for this behavior, then I feel like
You're checked out like mentally.
Okay, good. All right, what else do we have? Either a relationship or environment. Vanessa.
Negative comments at work, so normally an environment, I guess.
Okay, negative comment, all right, good. Don't know if it fits in environment, but negative comments or something in a work environment or something. So what are your behavior limitations? Early morning signs?
Yeah,
How's
I
that?
said, well, obviously the behavioral limitations on the rational thinking, like reacting. And then early warning signs, most of it was actually physical for me. So like my heart started racing, my back started getting really hot. And then at one point I literally just stopped listening because I was still stuck on what he had said to me. And I asked him to repeat it, and he repeated it. So
You're not
everything that
doing
came
your job.
thereafter, I was not, and I said was absolutely not listening. So most of it was very physical for me as far as the warning signs.
Okay, yeah, and that's typically how we get these warning signs. Our heart starts beating, you said your back starts
Yeah,
getting
it starts
really
getting
hot.
high, yeah.
Okay, so next time your heart starts beating, your back starts getting really hot, you may think about, all right, this is the type of situation I need to break the pattern, buy time, and build context rather than say I quit.
Or just walk away altogether until that calms down.
Okay, so we've got something, this is what I'm going for. We've got something very useful. We've got a type of environment, type of relationship, broad category, which is negative comments at work. We know the warning signs, and we know the positive actions. That's what we want to do with all this material. And we'll do some exercises next week, really designed to frustrate you and give you a chance to practice this. But it's not going to be as effective as that analysis that Vanessa just did, because that is something related to her personally and will probably happen again. You're going to have that reaction. You're going to feel your heart beating, you feel your back start getting hot. That's the bottom line. What else do we have in terms of dangerous relationship, dangerous environment? Sagnick? We talked about new environments, like new academic environments.
Yeah, I put in something else over here. I put in my interview during visa.
Okay.
And actually, although I have got a lot of US visas before, but last time when I was coming back from my Rutgers business school again, my visa officer didn't give me a visa, but gave me a different form altogether.
Okay.
That was known as a 221B. It's like
Was it disappointing that they gave you the disappointment?
Yeah.
Okay.
it's like, all right, you got to investigate further.
Okay. Okay. So your future goals are in question because of this.
Because of the visa office.
Okay.
So you work that hard, you get your experience, and then you get into business school.
Right. And what happens if you start screaming at the people at the visa office? They're like, all right, I'm gonna make that faster for you. I'm gonna expedite that for you because you're mad. No, right.
I mean, my hands were all sweaty, and it seemed like they whole sky fell on my
Ah.
and
Okay. Okay. Maybe that would be a time where you need to ask some additional questions. You've got a person standing in front of you, right? Who just gave you a different form.
just give it and like next.
Okay.
And get doing all these things.
Well, let me finish this thought here and see if there's any validity to this thought. That you have someone standing in front of you that's saying next, but there may be some important questions you have about that form.
Yeah,
And
they give you a number and
all right. I guess I'm not going to finish my thought.
You should have let it finish.
Where I'm going.
okay, I'll let you do it. So that's still like constant vibration.
Let me give you an example from my recent history. I just moved. I moved into a different apartment, and I got as I was in the process of applying for this apartment, whatever. Stressful moving, yada yada. I get this call. They say, "Sorry, unfortunately, your application has been rejected." And I'm like, oh, really wanted that, yada yada. And I said, so that's it, it's been rejected, it's final, that's it? And the guy said, yeah, sorry. So what happened was I ultimately got that apartment. Like I ended up, after he said, your application's been rejected, the rejection is fine. Like fast forward a month and a half later, I'm in that apartment now. Yes, yeah, it's like great. But what happened is I was able to control my emotions, I was able to think about, well, maybe this is a positive thing, and I was able to ask him some questions on that phone call. While I had his attention, while he said, we care about you, we don't want you to feel bad, I was able to say, well, what if this, and maybe I didn't fill out this form correctly, maybe I did this. And he said, well, maybe, okay, yada yada, I can look into that for you. And then I created this email back and forth and said, well, what if we do this? But I think it was because I was able to control that emotion initially when I got the bad news, where I was able to take advantage of when I had his attention to ask him a question that made it work out. And that's where I was going with this example that Sagnick just gave us. When someone official hands you a form that says you've been rejected, or not rejected, you have to fill out something else, you have some questions about that. Ultimately, it did work out, right? You're here?
Yeah, after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, like they made me run around.
Okay.
They made me go to a different city.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I venture it may have been harder to do when you're really stressed out and depressed about it. But if you're able to control that emotion and think about, let me just be patient, resilient, and think about what I actually need to do to accomplish this. That's where I was going with that. All right. So we've got some where naturally there's going to be some gray area, and that's understandable. But why I really reiterated the one Vanessa came up with is that is a tangible example of how we can make this abstract emotional intelligence stuff concrete. Is there another one I might be able to do that with? Or you might be able to do that with, and I could point out that you did it, Jared?
Because I had this situation with the healthcare exchange.
Okay.
They canceled my insurance.
The healthcare exchange. Oh God, I hate them. Healthcare exchange. You don't even get me started about how much time I spent on the phone with them.
Yeah, I canceled my insurance last year.
They canceled,
And
right?
it took me a month and a half to get it back. So like, I had to control my emotions because I was like pissed off.
Okay, you're mad. All right, the same situation. You start yelling at someone at the other end of the line on the healthcare exchange. It doesn't do you any good.
And then they don't really care either.
Okay, so I think, so how could we quantify that situation? Would it be a customer service type representative person who makes you mad? Would it be some sort of threat to your...
I think it's just frustration.
Okay, but how can we make that a broader category? Is it frustration over something specific?
I think it's frustration over like the system. It's like the system.
Okay, systematic frustration.
Yeah.
So you get frustrated at the healthcare exchange. You may get frustrated when the bursar at Rutgers Business School tells you that's just the way the system is. You might get frustrated when your company says, I'm sorry, you need to fill out this form before we approve that application. And those could be frustrating situations because there's not necessarily a villain person who you could really blame. It's just like, that's the way it is and it sucks. I don't have health insurance or I can't get my vacation. So that, I think, is a useful example. So what did you get in terms of behavioral limitations, warning signs, and positive actions?
Well, the behavioral limitations was at some point I just wanted to give up because it was just calling them every day. It was just wasting my time. And then it just moved very slowly because that's how they do
When
it.
you give up, and you don't want to give up because you need your health insurance, and you may need some other things in terms of this systematic bureaucracy that's going to slow you down as well. So behavioral limitations, early warning signs.
Just get frustrated and angry.
Okay, positive actions.
Patience.
Good. I like it. Anything else? Maybe one more? Wait a minute.
Actually, I don't know if I remember this. I remember some months ago when I visited my mom home from China, she told me that my father suffered from a serious car accident.
Oh my gosh.
At that moment, I fear I was frozen.
Yeah.
But next minute, she told me luckily he was fine.
you don't want to be trying to give a presentation right at that moment? Yeah. So that also might inform you of other situations that put you in emotional hijack. Like, hopefully, rarely, you're going to get a call saying your father's been in a serious car accident. But whatever happened to you physically at that moment, you may be able to recognize. Like, your heart might start beating if you're Vanessa, your back got really hot. Maybe you mentioned frozen, like you had a feeling of frozen. All right, you may experience that again when you're giving a presentation. Have you ever experienced that when someone was asking you questions at, say, a job interview? Have you ever experienced that when you found out you may not get your important government documents filed? Or when you lost your health insurance? Have you ever recognized anything similar to that in a business situation? Okay, good. So specific technical question. There's a specific right or wrong answer, and you feel like you're being evaluated professionally. Okay. Now, could you have answered that question if you'd taken a breath and thought about it, or you just didn't have the answer? No. Okay. All right. Well, where I was going with that is, was there something about your emotional state that prevented you from putting your best foot forward? And that's ultimately what we want to find. If you didn't know the answer, you couldn't have answered it in any case, then I guess emotional intelligence stuff does not necessarily help you find the answer. It may help you represent yourself more effectively. You could say, well, let me take a minute to get back to you on that, or I don't know. There are various things you could do that would be positive, and various things you could do that would just make it look like you're panicking. All right. So is this helpful in terms of quantifying our past emotional hijack situations and thinking about what we could do instead? This self-awareness is not only going to help us with self-awareness, but it is key to emotional management. What are your emotional triggers? We just went over a bunch. What professional and social situations bring on those triggers? Are there relationships that put you on edge emotionally? We didn't discuss this too much. Often I'll hear family relationships. When my mother calls me, when my younger sister calls, and my older sister calls and is judgmental, I hear that a lot. What types of relationships make you prone to that emotional hijack? Do you have warning signs? How is your behavior limited? Most importantly, what should you do? What should you do rather than standing up and saying, I quit? What should you do rather than saying, I don't know the answer to that? Well, instead, you should take a breath. Say, let me think for just 1 second. This self-awareness helps us avoid emotional hijack. When we're in emotional hijack, we lose rational thought. We do not want to give up our hard-earned rational thought. Also might avoid what we call a longer-term emotional hijack, which is the example I gave earlier. Suppose you had a bad experience with the folks in the copy machine or the copy center room, and so for the next 10 years working for that company, you never ever want to go down there. We might call that a lasting effect of this emotional hijack. All right, we've gone through self-awareness. We've gone through how that relates to emotional management. Last piece, how can we improve our social management? Remember, there were 3 subcategories under the social management. There was empathy, there was insight, there was relatability. Let's break down each of those and think about how we can improve each. Empathy. I say analysis and practice. I mentioned that as humans, we have this natural ability to empathize. If we just stop and think. Let me take a breath. Okay, that guy who just got on the elevator, he wasn't trying to bump me out of the way. He looks a little stressed out, so I'm gonna give him a pass. That manager who just came into my office and said your team's not performing very well, she must be under a lot of stress. In fact, I know she's under a lot of stress because the company's going through this change, that change, yada yada. I can empathize with her situation, and I'm gonna take that into account when I communicate with her. Empathy, we all have it. Just take a moment to think about it and practice it. Insight, same way. That manager who came into your office, you're able to empathize and understand that she may be under stress for whatever reason. What's the best way to interact with her? Well, it's to categorize what you're doing to make your team's performance more effective. That way she can take that to her manager, who's breathing down her neck. And what's the best way to communicate that to her? Well, do I pick up and make an angry phone call saying, don't mess with my team? Probably not. Do I send a professional email when I've calmed down? Maybe better. Relatability, this third subcategory. Similarly, some analysis and practice. So knowing what's going on with my manager, being able to empathize with her, having some opinions about the best way to approach her. And then the question is to actually do it, to actually engage in that interaction. May take some practice, like the other two. There's also two techniques in this category that I will go over that are good from an emotional standpoint. One is deciding whether you're going to use statements or questions. And the other thing we'll talk about is this idea of intention versus impact. I'm going to go over these two concepts before we finish up our theoretical discussion of EQ. First, statements versus questions. I'll tell you where I'm going with this. If you're going to communicate with someone, you can choose to make a statement to that person, or you can choose to ask that person a question. And in general, one of those is more likely to trigger an emotional hijack. Do you have an idea of which one might be more likely in general? And of course, there's a lot of gray area here. Which one is more likely in general to trigger an emotional hijack? A statement or a question?
Statement.
Statement, what?
Because it seems that it just tells somebody what he has to do.
Okay, could be interpreted as an order.
Yeah, it is order.
Great.
I have a question because then the other person is obligated to give me an answer.
Okay.
So the other person might feel stressed that, hey, I need to come up with an answer ASAP.
Okay.
Right at this moment.
Okay.
For
Okay.
the statement, I might say, hey, let me think about it, or I can get back to you. I mean,
Okay.
you can do that with the question
Or you don't
too.
even need to say anything.
Right,
Right.
right.
But a question you actually need to respond. I have thought long and hard about that specific concept, and we'll dissect that a little bit more. And like I said, there's some gray area here, but let me explain why I think statements in general are more likely to trigger an emotional hijack than questions. I like to use this example that statements occupy space. They occupy space in a way that questions could occupy, but they don't necessarily have to. I make a statement. It's something that you need to evaluate from an emotional standpoint. Something that you need to think about whether or not it is a threat. And if I make an absolute statement, then that could be even more threatening. Now, a question, it has a couple of advantages. If you ask it in a certain way, it could occupy space, but you could also ask it in a way that is less threatening than a definitive absolute statement. The other advantage a question has is it engages your cerebral cortex. It makes you stop and think. Well, the answer to that question of what skills my team needs to improve are this, this, and this. It gets me thinking about having a rational dialogue rather than if my manager just walks in and says, your team is not performing well. there's really no cerebral engagement necessary, at least on the surface, and it could be a statement that I evaluate as a threat. So, in general, I would like you to think about the notion that statements can be seen as more threatening and can be more likely to trigger an emotional hijack. Questions, you can definitely ask a question that will trigger an emotional hijack. Don't think that I'm not saying that. But questions allow you more flexibility, allow you an opportunity to engage your audience in a way that might be less likely to trigger an emotional hijack.
But there has been times, I mean, I most people do that. They would already have the answer in their mind, but they would start, they have the statement in their mind, but they would start with a question.
That's annoying, right? Yeah.
Let's say, in terms of the kind of statement that you put forward here, it's like, oh, so what do you think about your team's performance? It seems like that person has already said what the answer is going to be in his head, but putting it in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, Maria, I always discuss this every time I teach this material. I always discuss exactly that. And when I have more time, I will have students do the exercise on the following page of where we left off. Statements, questions versus statements. There's 3 common statements that are said in a business environment that are particularly triggering to the amygdala. And we start with those 3, and then I say, rephrase those as questions that are also triggering to the amygdala. And then lastly, where we're going with this is rephrase those questions as less triggering to the amygdala. So, you just did the first 2 parts. 1, the statement is your team is not performing well. The question that could really trigger amygdala is, so how do you think your team is performing? Now, let's get to the 3rd level. How could we ask that in a way that may not send our audience into an emotional hijack?
Can I say?
Yeah, please.
I think a good thing is to first say something soothing or something good that they have done or something that's positive. Then say, however, the only weak point is that this is the thing, and then give a risk mitigation plan that if you do this
Okay, so buffer. So start with a buffer.
Yeah.
That's a good example. One idea I had is you might start with a statement and then follow up with a question. So to be clear, I understand that there have been some challenges with your team. I'm not saying I don't notice that, but I want to come to you as the leader and the expert to ask what we can do to improve that. I think that's a lot better than any statement we could really come up with, because that engages your audience in cerebral dialogue more than a statement or a passive-aggressive question.
It's really a combination of both that you think is ideal.
Well, I mean, a question ultimately, but the example I used is start with a statement because you have a specific agenda in that question. If you have a specific agenda, then don't try to disguise it by asking a question. But I think that example I just gave, that's better than any statement by itself. Okay, so statements versus question, and we'll see some examples of that in exercises next week. But sometimes a question can engage your audience more effectively than a statement. So last thing I want to go over is this idea of intention versus impact. Now, as we communicate with folks in a business environment, as we communicate with our friends, as we say things, what we say starts with an intention. All right, I have an intention. It's to improve the performance of your team. So I'm going to walk to your office, I'm going to knock on your door, I'm going to say something, and that's going to have an impact for you. Now, the question with this intention versus impact, how do we judge ourselves? Do we judge ourselves by our intentions or by our impact? Next question, how do we judge others? Do we judge others by their intention or their impact? start with how do we judge ourselves? By our intention or by our impact? Here I am, Vanessa.
I think most of us judge ourselves, at least I do, mostly through intentions. But then it's probably the opposite of other people, right? Like you don't really know what's coming through their heads based on.
You don't know their intentions. So we judge ourselves by our intentions, we judge everyone else by their impact. Make sense? Now that's a problem. Okay. Alright, so I have good intentions. I want to help Priya improve the performance of her team. So I walk to Priya's office, I knock on her door, I say something. If I don't say it the right way, she can interpret that as a threat. She can interpret her job as being in jeopardy. And she judges me based on that impact. I'm going to end up as on the worst manager, a little sticky on the worst manager in an EQ class, saying I had a manager who didn't have any tact, or a manager who was insensitive. All right, so here's a guy with intentions. He says something to the guy across the cliff. Would you like to dance? The guy across the cliff says, are you saying I look fat in these pants? Your impact was different than your intention. It's just trying to reach out to you. I'm saying let's be friends, let's connect. There's this cliff, there's this gulf between our intentions and between our impact. When I initially took emotional intelligence, or the first time my company sent me to an EQ training years and years ago, the facilitator who taught that class liked to say that evil in this world gets way too much credit. Evil is very overrated. Instead of evil people, we have a lot of people with good intentions and bad skills. We have a lot of people with good intentions and bad skills. And because of the impact, we say that person is a bad person, that's evil. So evil gets way too much credit. Evil, this is the gulf, the cliff between these intentions and impact is evil. A little picture for us to get our head around this. A lot of bad things happen because there's this gap between our intentions and our impact. And I think the best way to start to clarify is labeling. This concept of labeling. It's not a tricky concept, not anything you haven't heard before, but it's just a matter of labeling your intention. I'm going to walk to Priya's office. I know I need to improve the performance of our team, and I'm going to use some labels. I'm going to say my intention for this conversation is to do this, this, and this. My intention is not to in any way question your leadership. My intention is not to make any changes to your role or your team's role. My intention is to do X, Y, Z. So we bridge this gap with labels. Bring that cliff close together. This is similar to some of the stuff we talked about in the first class with conclusions. And I sarcastically said, how do you do something so complicated as verbally indicate to your audience you're giving a conclusion? Well, you just say my conclusion is. The same thing, labels. I want to tell you what my intention is. Allow me to label what's going on here in terms of my goal. Label this intention. Say intention. So I knock on Priya's door. I say my intention is to have this discussion. Monitor for hijack. If I see she starts getting nervous, I'm going to say I see I might be having a different impact. And my goal here, intention here, is to help improve the performance of your team, not to make you nervous. Same for impact. So I label that impact. I say I see you might be getting a little nervous. I don't want to cause that anxiety. I see my impact might be different from my intention. Say impact. If we fail to do this, if I just knock on her door, make a couple of absolute statements, some bad things could happen. I could put her in an emotional hijack. She could misunderstand my intention. She could get defensive, bitter, hurt feelings, jump to solutions, under pressure, and jump to the wrong solutions. So we want to use this technique of labeling. I've got a graph. These last 2 slides we'll go over. Let's just go, I want to go through a thought process of how we might label from all the different perspectives from which we have a conversation. So this first one is, let's look at it from the initiator perspective. So I'm going to knock on Priya's door. I'm going to initiate a conversation. To label my intentions, there's some language that I can use. Then I'm going to monitor the impact this has on her. And there's some language I can use to clarify that. Then she's going to say something back to me. And I can help her label her intentions. And then that's going to have an impact back on me. Same thing. Label the impact that has for me so it doesn't lead to a defensive, bitter argument. So, this is very simple, but it can get a little confusing because of the different moving parts. Initiator perspective. I knock on Priya's door. I have a goal for this conversation. I say my intention is. I tell her what my goal is. Just using language that simple could make the difference between an emotional hijack and a good conversation. When I monitor the impact, I might say, how does that sound to you? Do you feel like this is something that could have a positive impact on your team? Priya says something back to me. I might say to her, am I understanding you correctly that you do like this idea, don't like this idea? I want to understand where you're coming from. Is it just you hate me asking you questions about your team and you want to show me that you're mad? Is that it? Probably not. You probably have some legitimate concerns and we need to understand what those are. Maybe you're expressing them well, maybe you're not. And then impact on me. I'm the one who started this conversation. So I said to you, I want to improve your team. You said to me, get out of my office. The impact that has on me is that you don't want to let me help you. And all I'm trying to do is help you. What do you think? Do we like this labeling idea? Is this something that could help you? It's not that complicated. It's just say what your goal is. All right, the other side of the coin, from say Priya's perspective. I'm sorry I keep using this example, but you just got me going from the knocking on your door thing. So this is from Priya's perspective. She, being an emotionally intelligent person, is going to help me clarify my intention. Because I'm just a manager who had high IQ, and so I got to this position with that and some job skills. She's going to say to me, is your intention, is your motivation? So she can understand. Is your motivation to put your buddy in my place and have him run the team? Or is your intention to improve the quality of my team? And then instead of going into a panic, Priya is going to say, gosh, the impact that has on me is it makes me very, very nervous. And I want you to understand that. I want just to think about the best way to resolve that situation. And then she's going to have a response for me. And instead of putting me in an emotional hijack, she's going to say, the reason I have questions is because I want to make my team better. I'm not pushing back at you because I don't respect your authority, but let me label this very carefully and say, this is why I'm asking you questions. And then lastly, as this gets back to the impact it had on me as the initiator of this conversation, she might check in with me. Is her response to my question having a positive impact or a negative impact? And if it's having a positive impact, I want to know, are we getting closer to getting this situation solved? Any questions? So what are your thoughts here? We just kind of went over some emotional intelligence work very, very quickly. I gave you a few minutes to reflect on some emotional hijack type of situations that you experienced in the past. And I asked you to do a little bit of that analysis while we're sitting here in class. Because it's the kind of thing, if you go home and don't think about it, it's easy to leave your mind. Do you think there's things that you can take from this material into your professional situations and use to communicate more effectively? Good.
A little more practice.
A little more practice?
They also come from inside.
Okay, good. All right, I appreciate positive feedback, but if you're still a little confused, that's okay too. If you're still confused about how we could work this out, or there's been, there's things that we need to clarify when we meet 2 weeks from now, I can hear that feedback as well. So 2 weeks from now, we'll do some exercises to practice this. We'll start with some teamwork type of exercises that, as I mentioned before, are actually designed to frustrate you, designed to make it a little bit difficult to communicate. And we'll think about how, in the midst of that, we can communicate as effectively as possible. We'll also go over some difficult question scenarios. You have to have a discussion about someone who's not performing well on the team. We'll do a little bit of that individually. We'll do a little bit of that as a class. We'll think about using all this. How can you use statements versus questions, or questions versus statements, excuse me. How can you label effectively in a way that's not going to put the person you're talking to in an emotional hijack. And we will finish this material with you doing a one-page write-up, similar, exactly the same as the thesis subheading framework, of how we can take this abstract stuff and formulate it into something with a specific thesis and clear bullet points. Because that's where we're going with this material. That's where we want to go with pretty much everything we've learned in this class. How can we turn something that's abstract into a clear, actionable takeaway that I can succinctly explain to someone else? Right. So thank you for patience and hanging with me through this emotional intelligence material. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Let me know if you have any questions on anything at all. What did they say?
So, I was thinking maybe.
What we can do is I can look at the comments and refresh my memory as to what I said. Or just go pull it up on my computer up in my office and give you feedback just to help you. With that. So you just want one. Actually, we're going to have to clear out of here because the next class is coming in. But I can pull it up in my office and we can talk at length about it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Would you like to pass that out? I was more happy.
有的时候经济系统就会跟第二个你想帮助你的这个团队更上去，就是你可能，但是你可能理解那个模式来说，你可能 picky 啊，你觉得挑剔，所以你现在先加一些词啊 ，positive conversation 就是来 conversation， 所以你这些人可能就是想帮你，就是说让他觉得你是过来挑剔他这样，对，是。
All right, excellent. Have a good trip.
复习怎么样了？我们的这个配乐。
Josh, do you still practice law? No. Okay, so when was this? You were in court or career before business school? After law school?
Yeah, I was actually part of the culmination of law school. They paired you off essentially in your first kind of introduction. I was in Florida State at the time, and they got 3 judges off the Florida Supreme Court, which is a few blocks away from the school, to agree to listen to us. So yeah, it was a little intimidating to have to go do that. It didn't start well today, I guess. I wore what they considered a very flashy suit. I had like a purple shirt and a purple tie.
Okay.
At the time I had a ponytail, and I had one of the judges explain to me that, this is the South and not, I don't know where you come from.
Oh boy.
It's like, yeah, it's like